this candle.
Call to order the Kearney R-1 Board of Education meeting. Please stand for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag
to the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Guys, sound. Come back in. Okay. Roll call, please.
Darlene Bailey,
Here.
Dan Holloway,
Here.
Matt Hunt,
Here.
John Kern,
John Kern.
He's on
Here.
mute.
Here.
Dan Weekly,
Here.
Susan Warman,
Here.
Mark Kelly.
Here, a quorum being present. I accept the motion to adopt the agenda.
I motion that we approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
All in favor? I guess we have to do everything.
Roll call.
Oh, I forget. Roll call, since we're on.
Darlene Bailey,
Darlene Bailey.
Bailey,
He's on mute.
Nod your
Darlene?
head.
Yes.
Dan Holloway,
Yes.
Matt Hunt,
Yes.
John Kern,
Yes.
Dan Weekly,
Yes.
Susan Warman,
Yes.
Mark Kelly.
Yes. There is potentially some confusion about public comment. We received emails from, I think, 5 either individuals or couples. One of them had declined to make a presentation. It was not clear whether any of the other 4 planned to participate. Because of the way the email is, what we're required by DESE in this, we're going to give them the opportunity, but I don't know how we will know if they want to participate.
Brian has a list of all the people, and he can allow each time for each person to see if they want to come into the meeting or not.
Okay, Brian, did you understand that?
Yes, I do see our first one, Christian Farrell, on the meeting.
Okay. We would start with her and the opportunity. Actually, I guess you would open it up to her and ask if she wants to make a presentation, 3 minutes. We probably won't have you close it at 3. You'll keep track of that if that's the way it's going to be. Does that make sense? And I'll give you notification. Brian?
Yes, Christian is unmuted now.
Okay. Christian?
Yeah, hi guys.
Hi.
How's
So
everybody doing?
we're trying to make do. You have the opportunity to make a comment, public comment. If you want to add something to your email, I will tell you up front that we have all had the opportunity to review your email. And you want to tell us anything beyond that, you are welcome to, and just let me know whether that's your plan. Kristen?
I only want to affirm my ask that this decision be tabled for the next school year because there has not been proper communication and because it seems very evident that the research has not been done to back up the decision that the school board would make.
Kristen, would tell us your full name, please. Clear, but also your address.
My full name is Kristen Farrell, and my address is 12314 North Stark. It's a Liberty address.
All right. Do you have anything else you'd like to add with that? We can't respond to,
Sure.
certainly we'll consider everything you have to say, Kristen. So,
Okay. I don't have anything to follow up as long as everybody's read the email.
yeah, they certainly have all had the opportunity. I can't speak beyond that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Provided. Okay. Thank you for your thought. All right. Ryan, do you see anyone else?
Hello, this is April Dodge Ostendorf. I believe I've been unmuted.
Yes. If you would like to make a presentation tonight, you would have 3 minutes to make the presentation. Before you start with the presentation, if you would give us your full name, please, and your address.
My full name is April Dodge Ostendorf, and my address is 9719 Northeast 136th Street, and that's a Liberty address. And I would just ask that you all strongly consider the points that parents have been making, both in the earlier meeting that we had with Dr. Nicely, when he was accepting some public comment. I see many of you on this call, of course, were at that meeting. And I would ask you to really lean into the feedback that we're giving via email, and then just reiterate that we're in the midst of unprecedented times when it comes to COVID-19 response in our communities. And our children walked out of school before spring break thinking that they would have an opportunity to return and, see their friends, see their teacher, be in a trusted space. And I really question whether or not the time is right to be making this decision now, as we don't know what the future holds for our communities. And that's it.
Okay. Just want to let you know, we can't respond specifically to anything you say. But we appreciate your thoughts, and we will take that into consideration in any decision we make tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ryan, any others?
I do not see any others on the attendees.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your thoughts. Next is consent agenda. Entertain a motion.
A motion that we
Dan
approve the
Weekly, are you
consent. Yeah, I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Darlene Bailey,
Yes.
Dan Holloway,
Yes.
Matt Hunt,
Yes.
John Kern,
Yes.
Dan Weekly,
Yes.
Susan Warman,
Yes.
Art Kelly.
Yes. Next, we have information items. Financial report.
So if you are able to pull up your financial reports, there's just a couple of things that I want to say, and certainly Ginger can chime in as well. Everybody has, the terminology unprecedented times applies to district finances as well. And so we were just recognizing that we need to be extremely conservative as we progress forward in the development of next year's budget. What you see before you is a modification as we know it for this year's existing budget. So we're in the process of developing that, and we'll come back to you at the next meeting for preliminary budget approval, then come back in June for a final budget approval. But we wanted to delay on the preliminary budget approval, which normally happens in April, just because there's so many question marks about what the state of both local and state finances are going to be headed into next year. We feel like if we can delay that a little bit, we can get a better handle on that. But as a result of that, And if you think about, as a result of that, we're certainly monitoring how things are going to look going into next year's budget. Dr. Millers is involved in every step of the way of that decision-making process and will continue to be so. With regard to this year's budget, we've made modifications to this year's budget already. And if you, we think about how the district receives money and spends money, both of those have been interrupted with this prolonged school closure. We've seen a reduction in revenues, are expecting a reduction in revenues, but also in some ways a reduction in expenditure. We began this year's budget, and if there is a document that you have before you, which is the fiscal 2020 fund balance report, I'm going to flip to it now because I can. And in doing so, what I want to point out to you is that you should be able to see that now, that fund balance report. So we began the school year with fund balances higher than we expected, which was right around 26%. You can see that right here. Part of that 26% balance is a carryover from unexpended revenues that we received from the Children Fund grant from the previous year, which artificially inflated that fund balance. Normally, it'd be right around 25% where we like it. We anticipated coming into, well, just before the school closure as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, that we would be ending the school year with fund balances around 23 or 24%. And so that represents just a slight deficit spending, and we thought that would be okay. Now we're in a situation where the potential for greater deficit spending is concerning. And so we've changed that fund balance to 22%. Ginger and I participated in a webinar through Missouri Association of School Business Officials today, and the takeaway from that is that going into next year, maybe the situation isn't quite as dire as what some people were predicting, but again, there's going to be a lot of question marks. So it's really important that as we think forward, we manage our dollars through the end of this year as conservatively as possible. And then as we develop that budget, Ginger and I and Dr. Miller develop that budget next year, that we recognize that, boy, we better build in some measures there as well, just in case things go south. And so we're in the process of doing that. That 22% does not take into account any federal dollars that we get as a result of the CARES Act. And today we learned that that's going to be about 85%, 82% of our Title I funding, which is, I think, about $80,000. Mal, I don't know that that's correct. Ginger, do you remember what that dollar amount is?
It was around 80,000. That was my estimate. But we haven't seen any money yet, so that's just an estimate.
We certainly aren't counting our eggs in this particular case, and well, we also anticipated a reduction Ginger anticipated a reduction in revenues from local tax dollars in the form of delinquent tax dollars. We did receive some today or yesterday, I think. So the bottom line, Ginger, we're continuing to monitor on a regular basis, and we think that 22 is a good number, but we hope it doesn't go any lower, and we hope it does increase a little bit. And is that accurate?
That is true. Hoping to gain some decreased spending from now to the end of the year. Does anyone have any questions? Okay.
Thank you, Ginger.
Thank you, Ginger.
Thank you, Ginger.
Next is Latin honor.
I believe, is that Tracy Carnes?
Yes. Tracy, are you with us?
I am.
Oh, Tracy Carnes.
Changed out of my pajamas. Hello there.
We don't have a great connection with you, Tracy. We can see you great, but there's a little lag in what you say. No, there's a lot of lag.
Frozen up on the screen. Perhaps if you close off your video, we'll be able to hear your audio.
Can Ryan do that? Is that better?
I just did.
Okay.
Yes,
Is that better?
Seems better.
thank you.
Yeah. Although, please don't change out of my pajamas for this.
We appreciate that.
So, Mr. Gustafson was going to introduce the Latin Honor System, and I don't think that he has opportunity to speak. I think that he texted me that he doesn't have voice. So that might be terrifying for him that I can run with this. So,
Pulling him in right now.
Hello. So earlier in this year, I got some emails from our Greater Kansas City High School Principals Association about the Latin Honor System. I kind of looked at it and thought, that it had some. Yes.
Andy?
Yeah.
We were having the same problem with you as we were with Mrs. Karn.
How about now?
Ryan?
That's better.
Great.
So early in the year, I have some emails from the Greater Kansas City High School Principals Association about what they were doing with the graduation. Some of them have been looking into the Latin system. I started doing some research on the Latin system, which is the cum laude system. And it made sense to me, especially when we're starting to move towards towards more of a market value assets and real world learning experiences, because it allows the kids to compete against themselves and not compete against other people. I went to Mrs. Carnes and said, "Hey, Tracy, have you ever heard of this, the Latin system?" And she got her Tracy Carnes smile on her face, like she had been waiting for somebody to ask that question for at least 2 years. And to find out she had been waiting for somebody to ask that question for 2 years because she had this presentation. She shared that with me. I looked at it. It has a lot of really good points. This is all informational that we just wanted to pass along to you. Nothing that we are wanting to do right now, but just something that we think might be good for our students going in the future.
Thank you. Ms. Carnes, would you like to tell us more about you? Yes.
I would love to. I've been wanting to do that since November 2nd of 2017. So the recognition system that you're familiar with, we use the distinction point grade point average to rank our students. The highest student ranked first, and then second, third on down based on that distinction point. The student rank number 1 is valedictorian, second highest salutatorian on down. It's possible for students to share a distinction if they are tied. So you can have a 1, 2, 3, 5. That fourth spot is gone because 2 students shared that number 3. We recognize the top 10% at graduation, and then we also recognize them with the Washington Harbor Award at senior night. That is strictly recognition for top 10%, and then at graduation, that's the reg cord that they get. So that's what we are currently doing. I will compare that to what the Latin system looks like, and then we can kind of look at the advantages and disadvantages to those. With the Latin system, you do not have class rank. In my fantasy world, it would start with the graduating class of 2024, but I think that we're not there yet, so ignore that part of this. It would need to start with freshman class, though, and graduate in with them, just like we did with the distinction points. We would not designate students by rank, first, second, third, or fourth, but rather we would designate them just like a college does with summa cum laude, magna cum laude, and cum laude. The district can determine what GPA falls into what category. That is not defined. That is decided by the district. And then the district can decide whether or not to recognize valedictorian and salutatorian at graduation. To truly be a Latin system, and Platte City is doing this, We would not even put rank on the transcripts. We would not even report them to colleges.
Tracy,
That would be ourselves. Go ahead.
I have a question on that. Do you know what percentage of schools do report a transcript, a ranking on transcript versus those that don't? Does it lean one way more or the other?
I don't know. I know more than half of high schools are no longer reporting rank. I don't have an exact statistic. That is nationwide. Compared to our peer group, all of them are reporting rank except Platte City, but nationwide, fewer than half. And then as of 2010, so old data, fewer than 20% of colleges were identifying that as important for admissions. So, but what I did was I looked at the colleges the kids are most likely to attend, and on slides 8 through 11, you can see what their admissions and financial aid departments identified in terms of whether or not they use rank. Most of them don't even use rank. They use it for admissions, and they don't use it for scholarship opportunities. So of the ones listed, the colleges that are still using rank, K-State uses it. They look at GPA and then 3 things, of which rank is 1. Without rank, they would look at the other 2. Northwest Missouri State is using, I have question marks by them because they're looking at dropping it in the next 3 or 4 years. That's not been determined. They have a way of working around it for Kansas City. Will use it if they have to take a holistic view of a student because that student does not meet the minimum recommendation. The other colleges, according to admissions and according to the financial aid department, do not use class rank for either admissions or scholarships. So that's BYU Idaho, Central Methodist, MCC, Missouri S&T, Missouri State University, Rockhurst, Truman, William Jewell, University of Arkansas, University of Central Missouri, and University of Missouri Columbia. Do not use.
And if you are asking about other high schools, it's something around the Kansas City area that a lot of them are kind of transitioning to a class rank and a Latin system. Only us and Lee Summit are the only ones right now that use a true class rank system without the Latin system, at least part of it involved.
And there's a slide that breaks down that peer group and what they all do with it. So I can keep going or not. I'm kind of in.
Yeah, go ahead and keep going.
You might have to bring me. Okay, so looking at the appeal of class rank is that it's black and white. Students know where they stand in comparison to their cohort peers. That idea of cohort peers is very important because it
Carnes,
tells you where you stand in relation to just your district, because what colleges recognized is an AP class in college chemistry may or may not be, yes?
are you there, Ms. Carnes?
Yes, I am. Yes,
Okay,
can
now,
you hear me?
Last can now. I mean, it was very garbled before.
Oh, I was probably talking fast. I was kind of excited. So.
No, it wasn't your fault on that.
Okay, yay. Colleges have recognized that rank is specific to the school. So what college chemistry might be at Kearney High School may not be the same difficulty that it is at Liberty or Polo or wherever. So they don't consider rank as well as they used to because they know that it's specific to just that cohort group. It does not allow them to consider where students fall nationally, like rank number 10% in one
Brian?
school.
I know she can't.
Yes.
Brian?
Significant
Yes.
I don't know if you can, like, Tracy, it is, we're having significant error, do I call that?
Yes.
Transmission
Hello?
is not, we're not getting any.
Can you hear me now?
Momentarily,
Tracy?
yes.
Tracy, do you have the option to change to phone audio?
You sounded like Rosie the Robot shorting out.
Tracy, are you there?
Andy, perhaps you want to pick up where the slide is on advantages to moving to a Latin system?
What number do I call, Ryan? What number do I call?
If you go down to the microphone on the screen and click the arrow, you should have an option to switch to phone audio.
Or the mic? I don't have. Oh.
I could pick up there, Dr. Nicely, if you'd like me to.
Please.
Yep. So I'm not going to go ahead and read through all of this. You guys have had it in your packet. You can look through it. A big thing that we need to look about is we are wanting kids to get out and do different things. We are wanting kids to do the Project Lead the Way. We are wanting kids to do internships, entrepreneurships. And right now, a lot of that is holding us back because they want to get the AP, they want to get the dual credit classes, they want to get the college classes so that they can get those distinction points, which allows them to get the class rank, which allows them to get the college scholarships. So when we're pushing for kids to do different things and do real world life experiences, taking away that handicap of doing of having to have those distinction points in the class rank and having everybody, like I said at the beginning, they're not competing against other people, they're competing against themselves. So they can do, they don't have to do all of the other, feel like they have to do the college courses where they can do other stuff and go out and get those experiences that we want them to get.
Andy, if scholarships are based on class rank, but then we're not doing class rank, how does that switch? Part
of Rosie the Robot's presentation that she was saying is a lot of the colleges around our area are not looking at class rank anymore. I believe she said that only K-State and maybe one other are looking directly at class rank as a way to do it. A lot of colleges are realizing that class rank doesn't mean as much because if they get in that top 10%, if you're at a small school, you can be in the top 10% by being, 10 out of 100, where in Kearney, you're in 30 out of 300. It's just a little bit a different thing where you're taking different courses where some of those smaller schools aren't offering the same higher level courses that we're doing. So a lot of them are going away from it and looking more at what you're doing in high school instead of exactly what your rank is.
What happens with the colleges that do require it or the scholarships that do require it?
So what it does, it puts a lot more emphasis on letters of recommendation from not only counselors, but administrators. You will talk to Tracy, and she says that one of the big downfalls of this is that it's going to take our counselors much more time to write out recommendation letters. That's what they would look for instead of the class rank. They'll look at those recommendation letters from school personnel to use more.
One of the things that I would add is if you think about the real world learning initiative, the number of kids, we had several of us today sat in students from Project Lead the Way, capstone projects presentations, and because we're not in school, they did those presentations on these pretty massive projects. We did those via Zoom. It was still just as amazing to see what those projects were all about. Likewise, for those of you who have children that have gone through Northland CAPS, we see the same thing. The problem is that we also have students that, because of the class rank system, don't want to take those courses, and they're going to focus as much as they can on the weighted courses. But the reality is that increasingly both colleges and employers are looking at those real-world learning experiences, prioritizing them as very high. Because if a student has an internship program for a semester at Liberty Hospital, for example, think of the value that that brings. It's nice to see the shift.
Anyone?
When we did our early college presentation, we had a person come up and was very interested in it. But the first question they had out of their mouth is, how is this going to affect class rank? How is this going to affect where our kids are located? And that's the one question that I was afraid to hear, is because we're trying to do what's best for kids, and instead what we're worried about is where and how the early college is going to be different in what they're doing, Project Lead the Way wise, what they're doing Northland Caps wise, or what they're doing in school. So it's just one of those things where it takes the pressure of competing against one another and puts the pressure of competing against your oneself, and allowing you to do, allowing the student to go out what they're most comfortable doing.
I'm now in on my phone. This is Tracy.
Hi, Tracy.
Can I go back to the question about scholarships?
Yes, please.
One of the realities is we can't know what every scholarship committee will do. Every college has an option that does not include class rank if the college originally considers rank, because again, fewer than half of high schools are using rank, so they have to have an option. So every college that I called said they do not penalize students who come from non-ranking colleges or high schools. The other thing is it should open up some scholarship options for kids. So I'll use my son as an example. He graduated in the top 10%, but lost an opportunity for a UMKC scholarship. He would have lost it anyway because with the KCP&L, so that's fine. But he fell out of the top 5% by maybe like 5 or 6 tenths of a point. When I called UMKC about that, looking into this, they said had we not ranked, he still could have been a candidate because they would have gone holistically with counselor reports. So that cutoff line of a distinct number eliminates our kids from some scholarship opportunities when a holistic approach might open up that option for them. My other concern is looking at real-world learning and ICAP, and I apologize if I was distracted trying to get in by phone. Thank you, Ryan, for helping me, by the way. The rest of you may curse him, but thank you, Ryan. In looking at, we talk about real-world learning and ICAP, for those kids who want non-traditional paths, class rank is a punishment to them. So, you know, my daughter does opera. Taking the music classes meant she did not take the classes that would have moved her up in rank. The kid who goes to the Career Center, and I think 8 or 10 years ago, our valedictorian went to the Excelsior Springs Area Career Center, graduated valedictorian, ended up with a full ride to Rankin for automotive technology. He would now be penalized because he could not have taken the college classes at the high school, but yet, brilliant kid, ended up with a full ride, doing really well in his career path. Career Center would not have allowed that valedictorian status for him. So we're eliminating options for kids, and I have to be careful. This is an informational item, not an action item. I'm reminding myself of that. But we're eliminating some options for kids by tying them to a number.
Albeit just 4 years ago, we made changes in our GPA and class ranking that took into consideration the harder classes. So, I mean, obviously there are pluses and minuses both ways.
Absolutely. And I have information for both of those. One of the things that we can do, Mr. Kelly, to still address that, just informational item again, reining myself in, we can look at, for example, for summa cum laude, you have to be above a 4.0 on your distinction point grade point average. So that highest recognition can only go to students who have taken those AP or dual credit classes. So we're still giving that opportunity for recognition for that extra effort.
Yeah. my thoughts there has to be some, having a daughter who is an athlete and doing CAPS and those things, and may not be doing the AP classes. I certainly recognize the benefit of not having class rank. At the same time, to acknowledge those folks who take tough classes in school.
Yes,
because
and
they are.
I think that's where you have the option of designating what summa cum laude, magna, and cum laude would be. The other thing I would just like to point out is just that concept of equity. I mean, the reality is going to be that because of, and I'll just use my family as an example, my kids are going to get the tutoring help, the technology help, the graphing calculator, whatever they need to be as successful as they can be. We did not need their job to help meet family expenses. So there's an equity issue for those students for whom their job helps support the family, or those parents cannot pay for the tutoring or the graphing calculator to go home and those things. And I think that class rank benefits families like my own who can afford those opportunities. And you see that when you see that class rank and ACT don't correlate. We have had some really, really high flyers on the ACT not be in the top 20% for class rank.
So Ms. Barnes, yes, this is an informational item, but when do we have to make this determination as an action item?
That is actually out of my jurisdiction. Yes, I recognize I have limits. The thing I would offer you is that we would need to start it with a freshman class. So it would graduate in with the student. So that would be an administrative decision to say, we want to start with the class of 2024, this freshman class, although I think there are a lot of changes going on right now. Maybe we don't need one more. I would offer you that the more things we provide for students, such as real-world learning and early college, the more disparity we have, and class rank is complicated by that, or class rank complicates that. And this is one venue for creating a more level playing field, no matter which path kids do. It would be a board and administrative decision to say, let's start with this with the class up and graduate it in.
Sure, and that's kind of the reason I'm saying, how soon do you need to know? And it certainly sounds like this is a significant enough issue I think the board would want to vote on and make a decision. I don't think that we can just say administratively we could decide, but, and part of the problem, I guess I would say, maybe not so much as freshmen, because we were talking about junior high and how their GPAs come in. Would it something that we should have told them before they enroll for classes next year? Or is that something that's going to come in more of a consideration as they become sophomore?
I mean, right now we have no current sophomores who took AP or college classes. So technically you could start it with this year's sophomores and let them know before they choose classes. However, I feel like
I wouldn't think we'd want to do that with sophomores.
Oh, I
agree. Freshmen. That was more of, do they have enough forewarning, so to speak, today or in August for freshmen to know that and proceed appropriately?
Well, because there are no AP or college classes for them to take sophomore year, yes. However, what I would offer to you is that the more the community embraces this, the better. So while it is definitely an administrative and a board decision, there probably should be some parent information evenings offered to help parents wrap their heads around this. And again, that's not to take that authority away from the board at all, but I just think that I think that our parents are often tied to that rank concept because it is so familiar, and it would be best practice to allow parents to wrap their heads around it before we say, hey, we're doing this.
I totally agree with Tracy. I think this is something that we look at it and we take a lot of information from it, and it's something that I can go back to my principals association and get better numbers for you about what's currently going on, and look at something that we could move forward maybe for the following year, maybe for this incoming 8th grade class, so that we have all that information lined out for them and ready to go. maybe even have some parent meetings or something at the junior high, at the high school level, to talk about how that would look and go forward from there.
And I would be glad to go to
like-
those meetings.
It sounds like we could, even without committing until next year, even then though, easily do it with the freshman class, this freshman class, if everybody is on board, from what I'm understanding, because of lack of AP classes for freshmen or even sophomores.
Correct. The only AP class sophomores for next year, current freshmen next year sophomores could have taken was AP biology. This year, I don't believe any sophomores took it. We highly recommend they not, because it's as soon as they've had that year of biology and they can't slow down. We don't have AP biology next year. So the incoming freshmen, sophomores next year could not have chosen AP or dual credit to move ahead in rank. So not ranking does not penalize them.
It would be interesting to run them in parallel with it, to see what occurs.
Yeah, I agree.
I didn't hear most of that, Mrs. Warman.
I said that it would be interesting to run it in parallel to see how disparate it is when you say, okay, high ACT score, lower class rank, to run the Latin system at parallel to this, if it were possible to do a test to see how disparate they really are.
And there are districts who are doing both. I think what we would have to be careful of with our students is helping them understand, with that competitive nature some of them have, you still have an opportunity to be recognized for that. How we would do that together and be a true Latin system, I don't think we could. Now, what we could do is correlate ACT and class rank for some kids. We could go back and do that historically.
Dr. Maxwell, you have thoughts?
Here's what I think. I think that, and it'd be interesting to see how many folks are watching this out in the community online. All of the documents on the board meeting are accessible. So, but I would encourage those folks as well as board members to really study this. I think there's some good valuable components to it, and I certainly would want to solicit input from not just the board, but also obviously Dr. Miller. And but I think it's possible, it's certainly doable to implement next year in anticipation of 2024 graduates.
Okay. Board members, any other questions for Ms. Carnes or Mr. Gustafson?
I just have one comment, Mark, or for everybody. It's been 3 years since I was out of the college system. However, I remember being a part of a lot of these conversations, and there was some parallel studies done of going the other way. Students who came in with class rank or without class rank, and what types of scholarships that they would have received, did receive, that kind of thing. And in most cases, the colleges definitely want to be favorable to the students. And what they found was that those that were class rank were not used, students were often eligible for more scholarships. And the schools are digging deeper, not just the ACT, not just the class rank and the GPA, but what else is it that students are doing? And I think that this definitely lends itself to being more flexible for our students.
And
So I would
agree,
encourage us to take a hard look at it for next year.
Is that Dan Weekly? Someone chimed in, couldn't tell what they said.
I said I agree.
I did not chime in, sorry.
Okay.
I agree with that, Darlene. We're seeing more and more colleges that are dumping the ACT for the same reason, right?
That's right.
Frankly, it's not as accurate of a predictor of college success, ironically, for which it was intended, than some of those real-world learning experiences that students have out in the field, because those experiences build resilience.
That's right. I agree.
Thank you, Ms. Carnes, Mr. Gustafson. Appreciate your time and your work on this.
You're welcome, and I'm glad to do anything further needed if it helps with a good decision. Thank you for your time.
Thank you both.
Yep, thank you.
Salary committee report, Mr. Morrison.
I'd just like to thank our committee members, Ida Cessna, Susanna Smith, Andy Gethson, Lacey Haddishell, and Don Coonrod, who puts all this together for us. So 2 studies that we are looking at, the study that I've always given you that compares with all our peer districts, and then this year we just looked at our Northland. And the reason for looking at our Northland, because a lot of classified people we compete with Northland and not people south of the river, like paraprofessionals, secretaries, for that reason. So we wanted to see how we compared with those schools just in the Northland. And then additionally, with this, last year the board asked, what would it take for us to get into that top tier? And so we put in percentages, and obviously this is not a good time to be presenting this in light of what we're dealing with, but I know you guys did want that information.
When you say Northland, though, you're talking about North Kansas City?
Yes.
Park Hill, Pike County, Smithville, Excelsior.
Correct. Yeah. So all the 92 schools and Park Hill, North Kansas City. Felt like that those are some people we compete with, especially on our classified. So we did put in that what it would take us to get into the top tier with that as well. And obviously I understand that's not a good time to present that, but at least that's information for you to take a look at as well. And so another thing just to keep in mind, last year, if you remember, the legislation passed that minimum wage will increase, and the one area that we looked at that we need to continually increase, but it self-funds itself as Kids Club by 2023. Not that we're under those regulations as a public school district, but we will compete for those same employees, so we will need to keep up with that, in my opinion.
Hey, Jeff.
I'm happy. Yes.
So the teacher salaries that we have, the 3 that you have shown, is that where the majority of our teachers land, or is that just the 3 that we're looking at?
And can you further that? Because are you talking about the 3 categories?
Yeah, the 3 categories. So like the BS Step 1 beginning, the MS Step 10, the middle, and then the MS Max are the 3 that we have on the deal. So I mean, I know that there's a lot more, categories because based on years of service and degrees that they have.
Right.
My question is that are these the 3 categories that most of our teachers, if we were to shotgun plot them, we're gonna achieve 80% of our teachers in those 3 categories, or is it less than that?
Right. We're going to find at least 80% of our teachers in the master's category and to the max stage. So, and also, if we were to do a plot graph, we would probably have, if you would look at bachelor's plus 24, we would have quite a few in that area of that 20% that have not achieved their master's. So they're getting ready to, especially our young staff. They get in as soon as they start teaching and starting their advanced degree right away.
Okay.
And if you kind of remember from our previous DESE reports, we're top. We're usually 1, 2, or 3 in our teaching staff, with ranging anywhere from high 70% to almost up to 82% of our staff having at least 1 advanced degree.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Are there other questions or comments that I can address with that?
If I could chime in, one, and this is something that I've indicated previously, I think is because of the situation we find ourselves in and all school situations we find ourselves in. I know that Mr. Morrison is routinely visiting with his human resources folks to find out what's happening in their line, and as am I with other superintendents, and because of the anticipated reductions in the budget next year, what we're looking at is providing that next step for our staff and whatever equivalent percentage that is. Obviously, that's a board decision, but that's what we're looking at now, as opposed to trying to make progress in moving our district forward and advancing where they land on salary. I say that it certainly is a board decision. It's not one that we need to make right away. And in some years, we feel comfortable enough to make that decision relatively early. And other years, because it's the unknown question marks, we wait until all the way into June to make that. This is another one that Dr. Miller would be able to weigh in on. But I would suggest that we probably wait towards the latter part of our time frame to make those decisions so we have the best financial picture. If you think back to the Great Recession of 2009, 2010, 2011, when we, as a school district, were facing $1 million shortfall and needed to make drastic cuts, we absolutely want to avoid that at all costs. 80% of our district's expenditures are human resources.
Certainly, all of our employees, teachers, non-certified staff, all want to know that. At the same time, I don't think that we're going to be in a position, probably not even in June, to make clear decisions what our budget can be and what our constraints are and what the future has to hold for us. And so I certainly would recommend that we wait at least until June to make any decisions beyond just our step increase. Anyone have concerns about that?
I concur with that statement.
Okay. Appreciate all the work by all the committee to give us that information. I wish we could do more with it right now. Certainly, we've been, up until the pandemic, we've all been talking about how we can increase salaries, and that's certainly the goal of every person on this board and the administration, and that's what we want to do. I hope no one loses that perspective, but there are necessities that we have to deal with. All right, thank you. Discipline Committee report. Laura and Dan.
Yeah. So Dan Miller and Laura Hartman are going to join us on this presentation as well. And before we get started with this presentation, kind of if you remember from last year, reported information on our alternative education and looking at that we, for the 612, we added in a person to work with kids in not only long-term suspensions, but also alternative placement for those kids. And then we also added in the K-5 BEST program at Kearney Elementary. So this is reporting kind of what has gone on this year, and then what we're kind of taking a look at for the future, and which will also lead into our discipline guide as well. So one of the things that I kind of tasked, and not all the people on the committee are joining us tonight, I will say that. So we have all those people that have weighed in, all the assistant principals and myself with this. And one of the things that I tasked our discipline committee with is looking at, is there a way to move away from out-of-school suspensions? And so that's one of the points that we want to talk about tonight along with this. So we'll kind of start our presentation in that. Is Ryan running this?
I'm running it.
Okay, you go to the next one. So we want to take a look at the 3 whats. And so we're going to talk about what happens currently in our district, what are our district findings, and what now.
All right, good evening, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
All right, so as Mr. Morrison was saying, kind of wanted to take a minute and talk about the current structures that we have in place as it pertains to discipline from an administrative standpoint. So think about these first 4 bullets here, just kind of as a progression from mild consequences to more severe consequences. So, anytime that we have a student who's been involved in a discipline incident, we could start out with something as mild as loss of privilege, such as driving, lunch privileges revoked, things of that nature. The next step would be in-school suspension, which is pretty self-explanatory. They're isolated in a classroom outside of their normal day-to-day routine. We then have out-of-school suspension, and then we have LTS, which would be any suspension that would go beyond the 10-day mark. Got some numbers in there as well for the KHS, or well, I guess, let me rephrase. For our building, for 10 through 12, we had 3 students who had a disciplinary consequence that resulted in long-term suspension to where they were placed in the alternative school, which was new for this school year. And then strictly just alternative school students, we had 8. Or have had up to 8 at any given time during this school year. So you could say as a whole, whether it's LTS or alternative school combined, we've had about 11 students there for the duration of the 2019-2020 school year. One thing that I did want to kind of emphasize as well is, we are talking about discipline here, but I want to make sure to address that the alternative school and Missouri options program is not just for students who found themselves in disciplinary incidents, that those are just our non-traditional programs that we have, and extending those options to those kids. One thing that we've talked a lot about as part of this committee and just part of the last 8 or 9 years in the district is how proud we are of the Missouri options program. And we'll kind of talk numbers more here in a little bit, but this is the largest number of students that we've included in this program to date since its implementation. I think last year we had around 8 or 9 students graduate successfully. This year, obviously the pandemic has impacted this to a degree, but we had 17 enrolled. We were anticipating around an 88% graduation rate, which would top the 75% graduation rate that we've sustained since the program's implementation. So that's pretty neat stuff that we have going on there.
And I will add to when we look at the LTS and may look like that we only have 11 kids, alternative and stuff, we're using the classroom off the field house, which has limitations. So we kind of have kids in waiting alternative, and we talked with the counselors that they developed through their multiple tier of support systems of looking at when a kid enters into middle school, that we're kind of tracking those kids, and if there are things that we need to help them, what are we doing at tier 1, what are we doing at tier 2, and when does it get to a placement that they may need something that's non-traditional. So the counselors work with that to kind of, and it's a committee decision, in other words, counselors, it's administrators, and bringing that to us to say this is a potential candidate, and then meeting with Mr. Kroll as well.
Hey, Jeff,
Yes.
This is year 1 of that LTS program, correct? This is what we implemented about this time last year. Is that correct? We are talking about the same program.
This year 1 of the full day. If you recall, the year and a half prior to, we had combined them with Mo Options, so they were only with the Mo Options teacher for about 3 hours a day, which is probably not the best case scenario. That's what we presented a little bit last year about that.
Right. Okay.
So in a lot of these conversations that we've had, you know, dating back to last year with the alternative school implementation, we've been curious to see what surrounding districts are doing, not just surrounding districts, but districts that are, you know, quite a ways away from us, just to kind of see, you know, what trends and patterns and what people are doing. And we did go on a site visit to Warrensburg, probably sometime in January. So what Warrensburg is doing is they have an alternative school of sorts. It's kind of it's an older building that was vacant for some time in the district that's now being used as an alternative placement, but also as one other thing that they're doing within that is they are taking their students who have incurred an OSS assignment and other surrounding districts. I believe it was Leeton, Holden, and Knobnoster, students within those districts who've been assigned OSS, and they're allowing them to complete their work, not fall behind at that one neutral site. So it was really interesting, the dynamic that they have set up there, because, you know, their mindset was we can always do more to reach these kids, and they're extending those opportunities to those students who otherwise wouldn't have it. So it's kind of a neat system.
And then additionally, we attended restorative practice conference, and that we feel like is a piece of this as well. A gentleman by the name of Kelvin Orr, who's a former school administrator, talks about with that you try to restore that relationship with the kid as well, and in some measures. But realizing too, and we'll probably cover it on the next slide, that restorative practices only cover so much with that. So, and kind of leads a little bit into our discipline guide, because there is still some traditional consequences going along, and also that some positive behavior supports as well with that. And then Laura's kind of going to present, because she's working on her doctorate on restorative practices, and also did a good job of presenting this past January. So I'll let her speak about that.
Ms. Hartman? Ryan, is her mic turned on?
Yes, it is.
Ms. Hartman, are you ready for your presentation?
I just texted her right now. Let her know we can't hear her.
Or C?
I will say here, Laura probably won't brag on herself a little bit here, but Laura and Brian Sloan did what they call hacking disciplines, restorative practices, and they had 2 packed sessions of our own staff in the January PD, standing room only, and people looking at it. So Kearney Elementary has started this book study, as well as the junior high, and they're both at different phases, but it is a piece of restorative practices, and so some of our staff are really looking into it, so that's a nice thing.
Mr. Miller, have you had a response?
No, not yet. I know that Ryan was texting me earlier about an option to phone in. So Laura, if you can hear us, you might try to phone in. Okay. So I can at least start the next slide if we want to. So Laura will be tapping in here temporarily, I feel like, and this is something that she's obviously very passionate about. As Mr. Morrison mentioned, you know, she's working on her doctorate, a lot of research and a lot of time and effort she's spent into these restorative practices. So this image that you see here, the conference that we went to a couple of months ago with Kelvin Oliver, former teacher, former administrator, this really rings true for us, and kind of some things that we've implemented last year, this year, and hopefully in the future, is when you look at that definition of, well, what is restorative justice or restorative practices? And so you can see there, it's a whole child approach to addressing student behavior by identifying and fulfilling needs. And that really just scratches the surface of what it is. And so really, when you look at that word restorative practices, well, what are you doing? You're restoring the relationship. You're fixing something, because we can always do more. Like, certainly we can hand out disciplinary consequences that are punitive, but are we really doing what we need to do to help these students? And so with that image there, restorative practices is kind of a combination of these different things here, that we're not deviating from traditional consequences. You still have to have traditional consequences.
Okay, I think I'm here now.
There she is. So
There he is.
Laura, I don't know how much you heard there, just kind of getting into what restorative practices are, and then kind of that image, how that really rings true in some of the things that we've spent a lot of time on here recently.
Absolutely, yeah. No, you did a phenomenal job. And as many times as I have used Zoom over the past 2 weeks, I've never had an audio problem. So I apologize. And if I could kind of go back a little bit and talk a little bit about the hacking discipline book study. So Mr. Sloan and I, we had 2 different sessions on restorative practices back at the January all-staff PD session. Mr. Sloan has been going through this book study with the Kearney elementary staff this year, and this is a book that just came out last summer. The information that I kind of came with to the PD was what I've been working on my dissertation research past couple years, and I'm kind of on the last leg of that, and I'm hoping to defend that dissertation in the next couple of weeks. But after that January PD session, we had some staff members at Hawthorne reached out to us and asked us to present during an early out in February. And then just this past month, I led a book study at the junior high with about 10 staff members there back on that hacking school discipline. So, oh, sorry, Ryan, if you go to the next one. Dan did a great job kind of introducing restorative practices to you all. And it kind of ties back to what our staff watched, the entire staff at the beginning of the school year, that Paper Tigers movie with the focus on trauma-informed practices. Restorative practices are trauma-informed. They recognize that all of our students have different needs. When you have traditional discipline, you have a student who misbehaves and an immediate consequence is given. It's really black and white. Whereas in a restorative setting, there's focus on educating students throughout that process, and they focus on repairing that harm that happens as a result of their misbehavior. Also, we get to work with that student to find the root of their misbehavior and set goals for the future success. This year, we've implemented the Vape Educate program as an educative piece to discipline in regards to vaping. And looking into next year, we're looking into anger management modules for different fighting offenses. And during my dissertation process, I had the opportunity to interview a principal in the St. Louis area. And I asked him, I said, can you explain to me what is the difference between traditional discipline and restorative practices? And he said, instead of doing things to kids, we do things with kids. And I thought that was just a great way to kind of summarize that in just a few words. And again, and Dan did a great job of saying that restorative practices are not taking the place of traditional discipline, but they work together to create an even stronger support system for our kids.
So as part of this, Cindy O'Brien, who is another assistant principal at the high school, she works very closely with data. So she was able to pull some data. Tammy Thomas as well at CEO, we lean on her a lot for a number of data things related to Power School. So this is just 2 years of data tied to OSS. And so what we wanted to do here was just kind of show you, one, how many OSS violations we're talking about, just instances themselves, and then also how many students are involved in that, because as you may know, we have some students who are involved in multiple offenses in any given year. So you can see there, this is all based on the secondary level 6 through 12. with a breakdown from KMS, KJH, and KHS. You can see that they have gone, well, let me see here. They have gone down. Now this was year to date, so obviously that's impacted a little bit. But on the right column here, Mr. Morrison was going to kind of show how that equates into ADA and attendance and things of that nature.
So in looking at 2018-19 and then 19-20 school year on OSS suspension, so the kid's not there, and so we're not collecting an ADA. So kind of taking Ginger's calculation, just kind of showing the business side of it. You know, and it's probably a little bit higher than this year, but chose not to bug Ginger in this time a little bit with it. But we used a calculation last year of $40 a day. So looking at that, at last year in 2018-19, we had 884 days of OSS. And so if we take that at $40 a day, there's over $35,000. And this year, obviously the OSS is down with that, but still there's a model to show with this. And looking at if we were to go away from, the reason I want to show this to you is if we would to go away from OSS and we would put them into a different setting and we needed the support of a personnel, this is a way to compensate and help pay for that individual.
In addition to the most important part.
Yes, yes.
Educating those children, which is why
right.
we're here.
And that's a great point, because what we're doing right now with the alternative and the LTS is we are now flipping that data. Because prior to when they came to me for discipline hearing, they were totally out, no education, nothing. Remember, we showed the board the data that 80% of those kids did not, either they transferred out, they didn't graduate, nothing. And the 20% that did graduate, they probably could have skipped quite a bit of high school and still graduated. So that's not a fair estimation there. So now we are flipping in that. So now we're getting some of these, for an example, student this year, mom said, I know what you want to do, but he's got other choices. We choose to go a different path with that. So the parents know that instead of them putting their hands up in the air, we're trying to give them an opportunity.
I think it's a great opportunity that we're providing. And certainly want to. Yep. Obviously, it's something talk about.
So to kind of piggyback off of what Mr. Morrison was saying with flipping the data with LTS, is I think we kind of have to take a look at how far we've come with LTS, like what sort of supports we've had in place, what we're doing now currently, and then maybe what we look to do down the road. So if we look at when Missouri Options was implemented in 2011, talked about that program, talked about how it's grown and the successes that we've had. At that time, there was no system or interventions for LTS. So what we did during last school year is we took LTS as they would come throughout the school year, and we combined them with our Missouri Option students, and that we made that work for that time. However, after kind of reevaluating, we said, you know what, these two groups need to be separate because they have different interests at this time. They could be, you know, one could be in middle school, one could be in high school. It's just, it makes sense to just keep them separated. So as of now, what we've done is Missouri Options is isolated in its own classroom, strictly Missouri Options. LTS has been combined with alternative. And again, we're making that work for right now. Those kids are finding success for that. But again, down the road, what do we want to do? Do we want to keep them combined forever? And a lot of these conversations that we've had and in a lot of research would show that we have to find the appropriate separations for these groups, and we have to find the appropriate supports in place to ensure, because they're all at different places right now. And so what best fit scenario can we accommodate for them to ensure that they're successful during their time here in our district?
Does online learning play a role in that too, Dr. Miller?
Sorry, was that to me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Online learning, was that your question?
Yes, does that aid in that ability?
I think it can, certainly. You know, with our alternative students right now, what we have found is that the online platform that we had used, known as Launch, that is an opportunity for us. It has worked for a number of those kids, sure. But we have found that online learning doesn't work for absolutely everybody. So I guess to answer your question, sometimes, yes, that is an option for them.
We almost have found that we have to look at that kid individually this year and find out what is the best course.
Right.
We've looked at, for example, Launch, if that is the case. We've had satellite courses, or we've gone to packets. But we knew that we'd kind of have that struggle with each one, so we kind of peel back that kid and what's best for them. And so it becomes kind of a personalized plan for them, how we can best be successful for them.
Next.
Yeah. So we just kind of want to, I talked about, we kind of flipped the data, and I just wanted a couple of these, because they've worked, both of these individuals and all the assistant principals have worked very well to have some good successes, and just wanted to kind of thank the board for giving them the opportunity to, that we've moved this way, and I think we can progress even more. So I just wanted them to share a few successes.
Dan, did you want to start on that with some of the
Sure,
Missouri Options kids?
Yeah, you know, with doing Missouri Options, I mean, there's just a ton of kids in there that have benefited from that program. And again, Missouri Options is not a program for students who have a long discipline rap sheet. It's just a non-traditional route. However, we have had some students who that was their last option, and that's what they needed, and they thrived in that environment. And I wish I could share names, and I wish I could share specifics, but that program is doing extremely well. And that's just, we try to reach everybody, right? And I can't say enough good things about that. Now, as I think about what Mr. Morrison and other administrators have chimed in with the LTS and giving those kids opportunities, the reality is 3 or 4 years ago, had those kids been out of school, they wouldn't have graduated. And as a 15, 16, 17, 18-year-old student, you know, they're not thinking about their future in that given moment, but 10 years down the road, or when they're in their 30s and they don't have that high school diploma, you know, they're limiting themselves. And so now we've given them that opportunity. Again, we have a couple students who've thrived in that. They've thrived in the alternative program. I 100% wholeheartedly, these are great things that we're doing, and we're going to continue to grow them down the road. And I just can't say enough good things about it.
When I think of, I guess, student success stories that I think about is some that we've had a very restorative approach with this year. And one particular student, before she came to us, was out of school more than in school, and just having that trauma-informed base with this student, really getting to know her, we've really seen just absolutely huge growth from her this year. So we kind of moving forward to discuss this next step for student support is providing an alternative location for students when they have an out-of-school suspension. We know that when students are suspended from school, they're at home, often unsupervised, and could be getting into trouble again while they're at home unsupervised, and they might not have access during that time to instructional help. So we would think that this setting, it's out of the traditional classroom setting, but you know, students will not miss out on that face-to-face interaction. The setting ideally would be off campus, but still kind of have a school feel to it. The setting, we would need staff and paras for student support. We would imagine that the school staff from the sending buildings, such as the teachers, the counselors, and administration, would still have the communication and contact with the student to be able to provide curricular or social emotional needs. Currently, we do provide transportation as needed to the students at Kearney Academy. ideally this would continue in this location as well.
And I want to say big kudos to Tisa Wright, our term bus manager. She's been awesome to manage the school. So kind of our last step that I wanted the board is, task this committee with looking at how do we get away from going from the traditional OS. How could we have that setting? And we look like that we could, if we could add a person for this, and we think we have a kind of a different location than just this small classroom off the field house. At tops, we could have 12 or 15 kids. And then also add in things that we're doing with the Children's Fund grant, with the PD, with the trauma-informed care. I think we can do some good things because we really saw what it's been doing, and they showed us that they've been doing this since 2013. And there's going to be times that, as we looked at the data, last year OSS suspensions were almost double what they were this year, and we're going to have those years. But if we could give them another tool, that would be great. And just wanted to show where we'd like to progress to. So happy, any three of us are happy to entertain any questions the board may have.
I do have a question. Yeah, I've got a question. So the LTS, I mean, has that been a real positive this year as far as how that's worked with the 8 kids that are in that program? And do you think that it has do you think the kids could be, restored or graduate, using that LTS program? And I mean, I just kind of want to know how year one went with that program.
I think the thing is that I can tell you from just doing discipline hearings, it's nice to give the parents understand that their child messed up, but now we're giving them an opportunity to still be educated, and so they're appreciative of that. We're finding kind of that now this year, with having kind of a full day program, the kids don't want to leave that alternative setting. And I'm happy, and Dan probably can speak more about that because he deals a lot with kind of that setting.
Right, I would echo that. I mean, going back to the numbers that we have in there, I think we had 11 at any given time. I think currently right now there's about 6 in there. And just the dynamic in that classroom, yes, it's small. Yes, they're very limited on what they can do. But the people that we have in place there and the supports that we have in place there, those kids are doing extremely well in there. And given the circumstances, things would be different for them if they were in a high school environment or a junior high environment. I mean, I don't want to sit here and say what if, but I know that things have gone extremely well this year.
We have a junior high student over there, and she's thriving. I mean, she's doing very well this year.
Great job, you guys. Appreciate your thoroughness.
Yes, thank you so much.
And I'll have Dan and Laura stay on in case we have the discipline guide coming up, in case there's other questions the board may have about that as well.
Very good.
Informational item, action items.
There it is, discipline guide.
One of the things that I'll tell you that with the discipline guide and kind of looking if we would go to removing that OSS, we still have OSS in there, but we used a lot of terminology of up to, so that we have some latitude and flexibility within there as well.
Anyone have questions for anyone?
Yeah, Jeff, with adding a lot of the up to language, does that set us up for issues with people thinking that, hey, in this case you did this, in this case you did that, and how do we plan on addressing that with the up to? I like that they have latitude, but I also worry for them for the administrators in managing to that.
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. It does give us that flexibility, and I think that really comes with our relationships and consistencies with each other. I mean, we call each other all the time and say, "Hey, what would you do with this?" And I think that would kind of help with that, if I'm making sense there. The consistency piece and us touching base.
I would echo that.
Mm-hmm.
Board, we discussed that over. I mean, we've hired qualified folks, and we want to defer to their expertise, their knowledge, kids, and we want to give those opportunities. That we can have a one-size-fits-all for any child, any student, because they're not. All things are different. So we're giving that opportunity, I think, to our administration. I think it's what we have to do.
I guess I don't disagree. I just worry for them.
Yeah.
I would echo what Laura.
We call each other a lot.
They absolutely do, and not only do they call each other a lot, but as we keep records of students' discipline in our system, then they also draw back on previous instances to see, okay, what did we do in this situation? But part of that flexibility is also a benefit, because there are times when we have to treat issues differently than we would have historically. And some of the issues that we face this year at the high school, a great example of that. We beef up the seriousness of discipline incursions. We get the attention of students much more quickly.
Hey, Dr. Nicely, how do we help new administrators that are new to the district? Because obviously, like Laura said, her and Dan and all the administrators chat, but when you have new administrators like we're going to have next year, what things do we do to put things in place to help them with their decision making on these up twos, so that they don't overextend?
That's a great question.
Right. Go ahead. Sorry.
I think that's a great question, and it really lends itself back to the idea of communication, and not just communication among elementary principals, for example, but also middle school and above. And so if they work together as a team, and then also look at the historical information, and Jeff's the conduit for that, then there's going to be consistency. But definitely a consideration.
If there aren't any other questions, entertain a motion.
I'll do it. Move to approve 2020-2021 discipline guide as presented.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Darlene Bailey,
Yes.
Dan Holloway,
Yes.
Matt Hunt,
Yes.
John Kern,
Yes.
Dan Weekly,
Yes.
Susan Morman,
Yes.
Mark Kelly.
Yes. Thank you. Next is insurance benefits.
Just want to say this year, so we've ran, our insurance is running really well this year compared to last year. So the drawback is that they take an 18-month look back, but we are on the downtrend. Last we were running premium to claim was about 82%, and in the medical side they like to be at 80% and below. So we were definitely meeting that trend. So this year it looks like a 5.9% increase with this. And if you kind of see the documents historically, from 2015 on, we've had pretty good single digits in increases, or some years even negative, which is unheard of in insurance. And also too, I had, you'll see in the presentation on slide 6 that we looked at the board paid is $475, and I know that we want to try to close that board did a good job of closing that gap last year. And if we have a chance, I know financially it's not the time to talk about, but we did put in there what it would look like if the board would do 500. And I will tell you that we've kind of looked at a later time, if we know the budget's in line, if say like September, we would come to the board and say, I think we're good. We could change this to 500 for all our employees. That may be a time. We vetted it through PSRS. There was nothing wrong with that, and also MSBA as well, and there's no problem with that. The one good thing, additionally for our employees, we did do on the vision a buy-up plan, which allows them to get new frames on their glasses every year, people that use contacts, those things. So that's a nice little plan in there of choice of that. Dental's not increasing, life's not increasing, so I think it's a good year, and hopefully we're still in that good trend. And additionally, Blue Cross Blue Shield will give us $20,000 in wellness money, and we'll continue to use that money, and we'll probably elicit the wellness committee to start spending some of that. So, I mean.
Great. 5%. Certainly in last year.
Yes.
But in general, 5% for your health care is a good number.
Yeah. Yes.
So, and if we can do something else, depending on what the budget
right.
is, certainly we will keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Anyone else have any questions about that? If not, entertain a motion.
A motion that we approve the benefits as presented.
Second.
Call, please.
Darlene Bailey,
Yes.
Dan Holloway,
Yes.
Matt Hunt,
Yes.
John Kern,
Yes.
Dan Weekly,
Yes.
Susan Morman,
Yes.
Mark Kelly.
Yes. Thank you. The next topic is our end of school year. Everybody's seen that.
Nope. McGraw-Hill math.
Oh, I'm sorry. Anyone have questions about that? Not entertain a motion.
Go ahead, John.
Move to approve the purchase of McGraw-Hill 5-year math subscription as presented.
Second.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Darlene Bailey,
Yes.
Dan Holloway,
Yes.
Matt Hunt,
Yes.
John Kern,
Yes.
Dan Weekly,
Yes.
Susan Morman,
Yes.
Mark Kelly.
Yes. Thank you. So now, end of school year, that's what, these are the dates that DESE has put out as to the final for end of school year. The seniors is the date that we had established before the pandemic. So we're simply following that. Anyone have questions about that? If not, John, you're on the screen. You can go right ahead.
All right. Move to approve the last day of school for the 2019-2020 school year as follows. May 21st, 2020 for pre-K through 11 students, May 12th, 2020 for seniors, and May 22nd, 2020 for teachers.
Second.
Roll call.
Darlene Bailey,
Yes.
Dan Holloway,
Yes.
Matt Hunt,
Yes.
John Kern,
Yes.
Dan Weekly,
Yes.
Susan Morman,
Yes.
Mark Kelly.
Yes. Next topic is boundary changes.
So I appreciate everybody's involvement with regard to boundary changes. I've had lots of good conversations over the last couple of days to provide some clarifying information for each of you. I will say, I want to jump back to, really all the way back to our parent meeting that we had. The information that was presented at the parent meeting is largely the same information that you as board members received. We had intended last month to make a motion under my recommendation to make the boundary changes from impacting families at Dogwood Elementary and having them move to Kearney with two primary reasons. One of them is to have a reduction benefit of student population for each of the grades at Dogwood Elementary School. We believed at that time that would have reduced approximately 50 students, a little bit less than that, but about 50 students across the course, which is by and large 10% of the student population. It's not a large percent of the population, we recognize that. But the secondary benefit of that was to balance the not class sizes, but building usage in each of those facilities, Kearney Elementary and Dogwood, and recognizing that that Kearney Elementary had some space available. So that was an important thing to do. And one of the things that I read that I said to you in my recommendation was that changing the current elementary attendance boundaries, so all families living west of I-35 and south of 92 Highway in Kearney Elementary School, beginning in the fall of 2020, was important to level of disruption. Both political, financial, and student stress is problematic. However, it does not outweigh the need to balance classroom enrollment across elementary schools. Essentially reiterated what I just told you. So my position has changed, and everybody knows that. And there are lots of reasons for that changed position. I'm no longer recommending boundary changes. And there are some lesser reasons associated with that. One is the cost of adding a teacher and the bus route. That's approximately $80,000 to $100,000. That would be required to add a teacher at Kearney Elementary. Another one is the recognition that while we did have some parents weigh in today, that it really wasn't a really good opportunity for parents to vet and have a discussion with the Board of Education, or at least articulate to the Board of Education. Another one is as we look at those new predictive numbers, we show Dogwood Elementary starting next year at an enrollment size about where they started this year. So we're not adding on top of the end of year enrollment, but we're starting over at that same smaller enrollment size of about 496 students. Doesn't mean Dogwood Elementary is not crowded. But here's what I want to tell you. The primary reason that I am no longer advocating for boundary change this school year has nothing to do with the fact that we fixed the problem. Even though we would be adding enough teachers at Dogwood Elementary School without making boundary changes, so there would be 4 sections at every grade level, and that at least for the beginning of the school year, we anticipate class sizes to be around 22 students or less. Doesn't mean that building wouldn't be crowded. We all know it would. Primary reason, and in some ways the singular reason that I am no longer advocating for a boundary change, is because I don't want to add the stress to a student population that have already undergone a tremendous amount of stress as a result of living in a world that has been under the siege of a pandemic. It is my opinion that we cannot underestimate the stress that is causing on our children, whether it be social, emotional, which is my primary concern, but also financial, economic, and to, in addition to that, add on to that burden for those families and specifically for those children to say, next year you have to start at a different school, I just think is problematic. Is it important to make the boundary changes? Yes, but it's not as important of maintaining some semblance of stability for those students. So that's where I stand.
Well, I've got a question. What communication have we had with the parents since February regarding, the board taking this, obviously we met with the parents. We were going to take it up in March. We decided not to in March because of other circumstances, and then now we're meeting today. What other communication was made to the parents before this meeting?
So we, with regard to the parent meeting, Janelle established a pipeline of communication with those parents that are particularly impacted, and then she also communicated with the larger group of the entire Dogwood family. And that continued as we anticipated making the board decision or having the board at least consider the option at the March board meeting. And then it continued again when the board, under my direction, when the board as a whole, we decided to table it for the month of March because we had just been on the onslaught of a pandemic. And then the fact that it was put back on the agenda for this month, for this board meeting that we're at right now, she communicated under my directive again. So I feel like we've done a pretty good job communicating with our parents under the situation that we're in.
Dr. Nestle, I agree with your points that this is, unprecedented circumstances that we're dealing with. But in relation to John's question on when we've had people communicated to or with, when I've dug into the numbers quite a bit, honestly, and I also went out to Dogwood and toured that building to try and understand what the possible options were. And I couldn't get, even as of this week, couldn't get my numbers to match your numbers. And I was off by 9. And I believe there were other families that were part of that catchment area that were added at a later date. Did those families have an opportunity to talk in the parent meeting? Or when were they notified that they were also part of this boundary change?
I would not suspect they had an opportunity unless they, let me back up and rephrase that. I can't answer that question. What happened was that we went back, and Tammy and Ryan went back and double checked the boundary differences and see if there were any additional addresses that fit into that boundary. I believe that was the case. And so nine additional students were incorporated. I will tell you that all families at Dogwood Elementary have been involved in the communication component of this, which would include those families. Now, whether or not they said, oh, wait, I'm south of I-35 or west of I-35 and south of 92, that includes me, I can't answer that question.
Okay.
I would just like to say, as being a part of the meeting, as John was there and Darlene was there and stuff like that, it wasn't easy and clear at that either. Obviously, I went on about how I was compassionate because I went through previous boundary changes with my own children, and so I definitely understand from where those families comes in. I understand the objective part.
Hey, Dan, we're hardly hearing anything you're saying, buddy.
But again, with everything on, I think we need to really table and review.
I heard the last part of that, Dan. But
Again, I said, can you guys hear me now?
No.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
We did this.
Try again.
Dan, are you there?
Dan,
Technology, we got a lot. Okay, I didn't hear any of your guys' reply. Sorry. Yeah, I was just saying I was compassionate. Obviously, being a parent previously who went through the district change when I was at the meeting, and I understand objectively the numbers and what we need to look at. But I really feel strongly that we need to table this and review it until we move further with the current situation.
obviously it's going to be up to the full board to decide what we do. I mean, these are very, very difficult decisions.
Correct.
I'm the only one that's been on the board when this district, when there's been any redistricting of boundaries. That was 12 years ago. That was before Dr. Nicely came to this district. We have been extremely, extremely fortunate that our numbers have been so equally growing that we haven't had to make those boundary changes. And I am certain that that is extremely unusual. It has come to the point where there is lack of equities in the numbers of the students at the school. Kearney Elementary, obviously, at least the numbers we provided, 57% capacity, where last year, again, at least following the information we were provided, was at 95% capacity. On top of that, though, if we into consideration the current needs for education, Dogwood's actually over 100%. We can talk about coronavirus, effects of that, and it's devastating. I have a high school senior. I know what that's like. At the same time, social distancing, and it's not going to end on May 21st when our school year ends. It's not going to be done September 1st or August 24th when it starts again. And the growth in our district for now is in the Dogwood area. So we are, when we say because of the pandemic we shouldn't do this, you've got to look at the flip side of that. Because of the pandemic, we have sardines in Dogwood. And it's not going down. We have to do, as a school board, what we think is best. We have to take the information we have, and we have to decide what to do. We all would like to have different alternatives. And we've all heard them. I mean, short of last month, Dr. Nicely had told us that's really the only practical alternative we have. And he's not said anything different about that now. He's just said, unfortunately, in these times, these are difficult decisions. And there is no doubt about that. But that doesn't mean we sit on our hands, we wait for another year to do something. We have to decide tonight. If we're going to change boundaries, tonight's the night to make that decision, Dan. That's all I can say. I mean, it's not practical, it's not fair to the families that we wait. We have to make decisions for teachers, we have to make decisions for buses. And if we're not going to make that decision, so be it. Everyone has a vote. I wish it was unanimous. I wish, and I hope it is. But I can't make that decision. And I'm sorry if I sound first in any way. It's not my intent. But these are tough decisions. And so
Mark,
we just have to decide.
I don't disagree with a lot of what you're saying. And the only thing that I can blame the pandemic for is the fact that it's given me more time to look through the numbers. So that's probably more of where my thoughts are based, more so than some of the other things that Dr. Nicely mentioned. And personally, I am not opposed to boundary changes. I think I am opposed to these boundary changes because I believe that they're a shorter term fix than even what I want. I think we will barely get through 1 year before we're doing this again. And I'll be honest, I don't necessarily think, Dr. Nicely, that I'm a full component of your plan of leaving it as is. What I'd like to see is to go back and look at some possible alternatives. Is there a possibility, and I know we don't like portable classrooms at all, I'm not a fan of it either, but what I'd like is some time for the district to go back and look and see if there's a possibility of a portable classroom at Dogwood to release some of the space. And the reason why I think we need that was from my tour of Dogwood recently, just this week. looking at some of the rooms that are already so crammed that in some cases are going to small rooms as they shift and adjust to try and remain as is for next year. And I think probably the biggest thing that I've got a problem with on this is that we have a new principal coming into Dogwood. We have a new principal coming into Kearney Elementary. We have a new superintendent. And we're making the decisions before any of them have come on board. And I believe it's very important to have them as part of the solution and part of the decision. I hate the timing of this. I agree with you, Mark, that we've got to do something quick and soon. I don't disagree with that at all. I just don't know if I agree with that. From an economic standpoint, I know that there is an 80 to 100K difference in doing the boundary change. Is the option of a portable classroom? It's cheaper than the 80 to 100K, but how much, or if that's the right decision, I don't know. And although I don't want to ask for a delay, I think I actually am going to ask for a delay, but with the stipulation that the district must come up with a very solid recommendation that addresses some of those other problems out at Dogwood besides just leaving it as is. The other thing, if I'm looking at the numbers correctly, Dr. Nicely, can you answer for me on the one that talks with the boundary, well, either the boundary change or leaving Dogwood as is. Under Kearney Elementary, for kindergarten, it has a red flag, and that means that an area to watch whether to expand to 3 sections. Is that correct?
That's correct. And so Jeff put go ahead.
And yet
it's a watch area. It's a great way to characterize it.
So then another question before I have another statement for you is, so then why is Kearney Elementary second grade after the Dogwood boundary change? Why is that not highlighted as a possibility of another section? Because those numbers are similar? Is it because of the age, kindergarten versus second grade?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Exactly it.
Case, how come Hawthorne kindergarten doesn't have a highlight under its section? And the reason that this is highlighted for me is as I was digging through the numbers, and we're talking about a boundary change for just Dogwood for that area, shouldn't we really be sitting back and saying it's a broader boundary change and we are not ready to look across the board to start next year with that? That's part of what led to my decision to go and dig into the numbers further and say, gosh, I think this is just too temporary a fix. I think it's barely getting us a year, and I'm not comfortable with that. I'd like a little bit more out of what changes we make.
You want to talk about the numbers?
And
the only
I
thing
just want to say
that Jeff pointed out is that Kearney Elementary is a title school, so overall we have to monitor the numbers and ensure that those are on average lower than the other schools. But no, that's absolutely it. You're accurate, I would say. The other thing I would say is that our numbers fluctuate quite a bit because we're a district with 4 elementary schools and everything else are ones. They fluctuate quite a bit for those 4 elementary schools. The year before last, Southview Elementary had larger enrollment than Dogwood did. And in the course of a year, those flipped. So we expect a significant increase in Hawthorne population in the coming year or so with the addition of 14 fourplexes just approved by City Council to begin construction, I think, in the spring. So that's all.
Susan, you talked about portable classrooms. Ironically, after we talked approximately a month and a half ago, I went and looked at numbers. I looked at some pre-owned ones on eBay. Even Bill and I talked about it, and I went and looked at that. Just your cost of your classroom are approximately $50,000 each, not including your utilities, not including your the pads and sidewalk that go there. And then you're looking, I mean, the ones I was looking at were in Texas. Texas weather, and I don't know what part it was, we need some type of ED transportation, and I say transportation, entrance and ingress and egress from those classrooms from the school. Those are not easy to accomplish, and those are concerns also. To put a number on conditioning and heat, that's obviously additional cost.
Yeah.
For 1 year, you can do it for more than 1 year, so you don't have that cost potential. Again, that's what we want to do.
You'd have an ongoing cost every year with the boundary change too. So you know, either way, you're going to have an ongoing cost. You decide to keep portable classrooms for longer than a year. If you decide to make this boundary change longer than a year, that still sustains too. So,
I agree. I was just pointing out what that initial cost was.
I'm sorry, I missed that. What?
No, all I was pointing out, you said you weren't sure what the initial cost was. I was trying to provide that. No,
okay.
You're correct.
I feel probably more strongly that the people who are going to be impacted by this, not just the families. That's obviously a very emotional decision for a family. My kids have gone to 3 different elementary schools, a couple of them have. I understand that part of it, but we're not involving the people who are going to be leading those buildings or our district.
I want to chime in there. So I'm one of the families that will be affected by this change. My son, who is a 2nd grader going into 3rd, will be going to a new building, and my daughter, who's a kindergartner, will be going to a new building. On top of that, I feel like I have a lot of attachment to Dogwood in that my son, who passed away from cancer, paintings are up in the entryway of Dogwood as part of a painting program that they started at Dogwood to honor my dead son. So I'm directly impacted. My wife has cried many nights about this change. And I think that if we step back for a second and we look at what's best for kids is what we have to look at. And smaller classrooms are always a better option for kids and their ability to learn and have one-on-one interaction with teachers. And if we talk to teachers, which I walked Dogwood myself, and I talked to teachers, and the teachers told me this was pre-COVID, and the teachers told me, my room is too full. I do not have room. When we walk the hallways, we have IEP classes in the hallways. This, you could call it what you want to call it, but this has to happen. Because if we're about kids and we're about equity and we're about kids and their ability to learn and that we care for them and then we want them to do well, the best thing for them is a smaller classroom. And so I feel very personal about that.
I think you need to be the words in that you recognize that every single one of us care about kids, and that is why we are on this board.
Well, but what I'm telling you is that this is a very personal thing, and for us to say that there's nobody here that has that personal touch, I do.
No, I'm not saying that nobody has that personal.
Well, that was what you said. That was what you said.
I would like to take away, though, when we go back and reflect back to that night of the parent meeting, there were several teachers there, and some of the teachers were like, yeah, we want this change. We need to concur what John says. They wanted, but they didn't want it in that way. They didn't want the boundary change, and they didn't want, all the teachers at the table that I was sitting at and other teachers I talked to in the room, that wasn't the way they wanted us to approach it. And that's what was communicated to me that night from the teachers that were there at the meeting. I just wanted to express that.
So how did they want us to approach it?
Oh, well, given it's not within our budget range, Dan, but a lot of them were like, hey, wasn't the school designed on with more land to build onto at some point? That was initially one of the options one of them said. Yeah.
Oh, I mean, I honor their words, but at the same time, they have to be valuable. And so,
yeah.
I mean, we need to understand that as well. So,
yeah.
We just need to decide whether we're going to move, how we're going to move forward, or whether we are moving, or whether we're staying steady.
And I think I think the goal of trying to reduce class size is what everybody is thinking of here, Mark. I don't think that we're ignoring the fact that we need more one-on-one between teacher and student, and that we'd like to maintain a smaller class size. I think that's what I think that's what everybody wants and everybody's trying to do. It's just that there are different methods for doing it.
Absolutely.
Bill, I have a question that I think I want everyone to hear the answer is the boundary changes that you have proposed, those boundary changes, do you feel like are a long-term fix? Meaning, you know, whatever boundary change we do now, that boundary change would remain the same along with others, if that's the case, 2 to 3, 4, or 5 years down the road. So I guess my question is, and I guess what I'm really looking for is, because I think Susan's kind of referring to this a little bit, is if we're making a boundary change just to make a boundary change to help fit classrooms, is that boundary change going to stay in effect 5 years down the road? So we're not affecting the same kids over and over and over again. So if I'm a second grader and I'm going to Kearney Elementary and then now third grade, I've got to go to Southview. So that's my question. The boundary change for which you proposed, is it a long-term, and long-term can be, you know, judgmental, is it 4 to 5 years down the road?
That's a good question. And it's a question that was brought up at the parent meeting. And my answer then, as it is now, is no, it's not a long-term. We anticipate, as we have seen historically in the last couple of years, primary growth has been located on the west side with subdivision homes. Once the interchange is completed, that growth is going to accelerate rather quickly. So we fully anticipate the next elementary school being on the west side of I-35. Therefore, we would have 2 on the west side of I-35. It's likely at that time we would change boundaries for all of our elementary schools, so to spread the pain uniformly. So some of those students that we are impacting here, that we're discussing about impacting here, could potentially be, or families I should say, be impacted again 2 or 3 or 4 years down the road. What I would say is that at their request, there was a conversation about, if you do it now, don't hurt us again. Hold us harmless, even if it's the individual family. So we certainly would place that little bit of information request under consideration at that time. But I think we can fully expect
we haven't even talked about an elementary on that side of the highway again. I mean, philosophically, we've talked about it, so I would consider that a long term. So,
but if I look at the numbers at Southview, Dan, I mean, and then over at Hawthorne too, when we talk about a boundary change, that might have to be more significant than what we're talking right now, because Southview's numbers are starting, some of those are starting to go up too. And I know most of the building is going on over on the west side of town, but this change doesn't, like I said, it doesn't feel like from a numbers perspective that it buys us enough. That I mean, I'd feel more comfortable if it was, boy, I feel comfortable with this boundary change that it's gonna last a couple of years, and I don't think this one will. I don't think it'll make that big of an impact for 2 years. I think it's 1, maybe.
Darlene, are you?
Sorry.
Comment?
I do have a comment, and I was like halfway through it. Sorry. No, one of the things that I was going to say, which Dr. Nicely did just say, was having to do with impacting families twice. And I think that there are some unknowns about how long this is going to last. And I can say that I, going into March, was very much an advocate for boundary change. I thought it was the right thing to do based on the information that we were given from the administration and the recommendation we were given when I went to the meeting of the parents and I heard their comments. I was moved by a couple of things, and my position was still we change, but it was impacted by a discussion that we had that many parents were very strong about. If this is going to happen to us, we really hope that there's a lot of things in place that ease the transition. And some of those things were, you know, counseling for students and having an opportunity for the students that were changed to be able to visit their new school, say goodbye to their old school. And so even up until last week, when we found out we would not be going to school until, you know, for the rest of the school year, I was thinking, you know, that could still happen. Obviously now that cannot still happen. That has definitely changed my thinking on this in terms of is now the right thing to do. I definitely think it needs to happen, but I am swayed by timing because of the situation we're in with the coronavirus.
I kind of am in the same boat too. I was Flex this morning, and now I'm mixed on the signal with it now too. But I agree with what Susan was saying earlier too, and what you're saying as well, Darlene.
There's no motion. Okay, I mean, that's what the board has to decide, and whether we want to move forward with anything. Or again, I mean, our alternatives right now are making boundary changes, or we don't do anything for this school year.
Mark, is there a possibility to move to table it to the next meeting to see if the district can come? Because right now, if we don't do a motion to move boundaries, it is going to stay as is. But can we move that the district come back with any other alternatives between now and the next meeting? Or do we not do that?
We certainly, I mean, you can look at any other practical option, okay? And there's a reason, though, that this was the option that we were presented before, okay, when we talk about practical options, all right? There was a reason we came to the conclusion that this was a practical option, okay? So when I say that, I'm not trying to just pound it that way. We looked at all those options. I know from my conversations with Bill, and I know the folks that he talked to, we looked at all the options before we came to this conclusion that it was the right thing to do. Are there things that can be done? Absolutely. Could you bring in classrooms? Can, okay? Those didn't seem like practical things. But if we are going to change boundaries, this is the last month, okay? If we don't do it tonight, that's not an option in May.
I understand what you're
And
saying.
I think that's unequivocal.
I agree with you.
That's all I say, okay? We can always look at other alternatives. We can look at long-term things. We can talk about changing things at the junior high, so there's 3 levels there, and making changes until we get a new elementary. A new elementary at best is 4 years away, maybe 3. We don't know that. That's the best alternative. It's not a quick fix, and there's lots of pieces that go into it. So it's only if we need to make a change for next year and the boundary, tonight's tonight. That's all I'm saying. We always look at what alternatives are, what our options are. And again, you know, is it perfect? No, we don't want to be gerrymandering either, so that we pick one set of parents out or one set of kids and they get to stay there because somebody had influence or not have influence. We didn't gerrymander. We took a straight line. It included 10% of, essentially, of Dogwood leaving Dogwood and going to Kearney Elementary, which is the only practical school that has space right now, okay? There's building that, West isn't the only growth. There's growth in Greenfield that's going to Hawthorne. So Hawthorne wasn't a good option there. Southview, last year, Southview and Dogwood grew at the same rate. This year it's not. And this year, you know, and talking to Darlene and talking to my other friends who are realtors, talking to the builders, the building is on the west side of town. That's where the growth is going to be. We can wait another year. We can pack everybody in, and we'll survive. Everybody will. These kids are resilient. They're resilient, and being able to move to a new school with a different principal, wherever that is. They're all going to have new teachers. None of them are going to be in the same classroom they left when school was closed down because of COVID. Okay, they're not. These kids will make through. As you noted, Susan, your kids changed schools 3 times. It may be to their advantage as opposed to their disadvantage. But timing-wise, if we can't just table the next month and say, okay, we'll think about boundaries then. This is,
That
we've
makes
decided,
sense. That makes
okay,
sense.
we have decided that because of COVID, we don't want to make this change now, okay? That's fine, okay? We are all, as you note, Susan, as John notes, we're all here to do the best for all the kids. It isn't one size fits all, and not one group decides, okay? We just have to move one way or the other, okay? And we'll talk it through it all night, but next month is not an option for changing boundaries. That's the only, can we keep looking? Absolutely. But we're not going to build a new school, as Dan Holloway mentioned, that the teachers, a new school or an add-on to the school at Dogwood is not going to happen for next year. It might happen for the next year for an add-on at best. And then, you know, part of it, we do have the economics of the situation. We have to decide, is it practical to add on to Dogwood a little, a lot, or is our growth continuing? And so it's best to build a new elementary instead of just adding on to this. All of those things we all discuss, we all think about. You know, when you say, aren't we doing enough? We're doing what we have the ability to do. I mean, we have some limitations because of the size of Kearney Elementary. Heck, it would be great if everybody was exactly the same. It's not that issue. I mean, we are creating a much closer to equity with the boundary change that was proposed. You're taking 10% off, you're adding it to Kearney Elementary, that's it. That's all we have to know, okay? Know we're all trying to do the right thing. Know that Bill, up until COVID, said this was the move to make, okay? Remember that. Okay? And so that was it. There's a reason that was proposed. There's a reason that we suggested, and we were ready to vote on it last month. This got put back on because we needed to make a decision, or not. But if we're going to change boundaries, this is the night to do it, or it's not going to happen, and we're not going to have any real practical solutions beyond this. We're going to start looking at what our practical solutions are for next year, and we'll have more numbers. You asked, Dan asked, is this long-term? Asked to Bill. Heck, nobody's crystal ball is that crystal clear. We look at numbers. Heck, we've hired companies to come in and give us projections of what our numbers are going to be, and they've never been right. Okay? They've never been right. That's not, you know, I can't pound the table long enough times to say that. They just don't know. And heck, nobody could have anticipated this pandemic. But that's another issue. We won't go down that road. Okay? I've talked a heck of a long time. We just need to decide. I understand. I don't want this to feel like it's forced on anybody. I don't want it to feel like it's forced on us. And if folks aren't comfortable with it, then let's not do it. Simple enough. But remember, if it's boundary, it's tonight. If it's not tonight, we're not doing it this year. And the kids are going to be crowded at Dogwood, as Dr. Nicely says. Well, our numbers might be the same when we start the school year as they were when we started last year. They were crowded then. They might be. Darlene, if you want to chime in and tell us what you're selling houses for, let us know. It's improbable that that's the case, that we're going to end next year at the same level we are this year. Okay? And they're going to be more crowded, and there's going to be less effort to do social distancing. So it's all of those things. We just need to decide.
Can I ask a quick question?
You can ask lots of them.
Dr. Nicely, if a student that attends Dogwood here would be in a classroom that the parent is not comfortable on the class size, can they request a change to Kearney Elementary if they provide transportation?
Sure.
Thanks.
But I would tell you,
But that's not a guarantee that they're going to.
they can request. She asked if can they request.
No,
What we do in special circumstances, which we get those from time to time, is we review class sizes in both schools, make a decision based upon what's best for the student at a particular time frame. If you look, I would agree with Mr. Kelly on this point, that decision should be made tonight or not. We are talking about the addition of two additional classroom teachers. Recall that. Those numbers are in front of you. Class sizes, we estimate, would start no larger than 22. Does it crowd other things? It absolutely does. But I've said this before, and I'll say it again, and then I'm going to be quiet. Schools get crowded. We're still doing a great job teaching kids. The test scores at Dogwood Elementary are excellent. Every teacher you talk to says, yes, I'm crowded, but I love it. I love these kids, including the principal, and we're going to be fine next year. Is it going to be crowded, and is the problem not going to go away? Both are true. It's not going to go away. We're still going to have to address it, and it will be crowded. But it's not unreasonable, in my estimation. In my personal opinion, it's not unreasonable with the addition of those two teachers. And the class sizes, they spend most of their time in their classrooms. And when you have 22 at a class or less, that's not bad at all.
Anybody else?
Anybody want to add to the motion?
Yes. If there are no motions, if there are motions, this is to make the motion.
I'll make the motion that we move forward with the boundary change. I'm just going to leave it open at that. I mean, do I need to be more specific than that, Mark?
I think you need to make it specific, the boundary change for all of west of I-35 and south of 92 Highway go to Kearney Elementary.
Okay, so
that's the intent.
That's the motion. Yeah, I'll make the motion. That's fine. I'll make the motion that we move forward with the boundary changes of everything south of 92 Highway and west of I-35 be part of Kearney Elementary.
Second.
Does that cover it? Okay.
Second.
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 Okay. Roll call, please.
Darlene Bailey.
You're on mute, Darlene.
Darlene.
You're on mute,
Are
Darlene.
we voting now?
It's really hard.
Are we voting?
It's hard to be
There is
first.
a
I'm
motion.
sorry. I vote no.
Okay, there is a,
I vote no.
Dan Holloway.
No.
Matt Hunt.
No.
John Kern.
Yes.
Dan Weekly.
Yes.
Susan Warman.
No.
Mark Kelly.
yes. Motion does not carry.
There you go.
I just want to say I appreciate all of you. These are never easy decisions, and we still got a lot of work to do. And in this particular case, Dr. Miller's going to jump in as well, and we got to solve these problems. We have to recognize that they're not going away. So everybody's given this a ton of consideration, and I couldn't ask for anything more than that as a superintendent. So
One thing, it wasn't on the agenda, this will turn into board member comments at this point. We've talked about dates for graduation. We changed that. There was an email sent out to the district, or at least all high schoolers, projecting June 7th. That seems unlikely at this point. We don't know what's going to happen over the next month, though Washington University has projected that the peak in Missouri won't hit until late May. Obviously, if that's the point that the peak happens, we're then sliding down the other side about as slowly as we got to that peak, okay? And that wouldn't be practical. You know, certainly, I've had discussions with Dr. Nicely of the possibility that we could do an outdoor graduation at some point, potentially in July, okay? It's not my decision.
I had a question about that. What do you, at this point, and I know it's hard to predict, because I've been called by a couple of people with, questions about, other commitments and those kinds of things. Do you project a date that you would decide whether or not we would push further from June 7th?
Well, I know. We're making these decisions as quickly as we can, and I feel like we want to get through April 28th, which is supposed to be the peak now in Clay County that they put to, according to Gary Zoberak, the director of Clay County Health Department. But it was supposed to be April 19th, so they pushed that back to April 28th. I would say when we get to the end of April, we'll have a better idea what a month away looks like, or 5 weeks will look like. But I do agree with Mark. Some school districts are already having conversations about having virtual graduations. Everybody that I talk to in this community has a real distaste for virtual graduation and don't care when graduation is, but wants to have one in person, whether it's outside or inside. Whether we practice social distancing, whether it's a graduation, instead of 300 people, there's 3 different graduations of 100 social distancing, or 6 different graduations of 50 social distancing. Those are some of the talking points as well. But I think we get to the end of this month and we kind of review where we're at, and an effort to do the very best we can for our graduates and their families. Our high school seniors are bearing the brunt of this pandemic, in the sense that they're missing their final semester with all of their friends, all of their activities, prom, graduation, and all the other activities that go with it, at a time in their life when that's the thing that they cherish. So we're going to do the very best we can so that we can get as many of those activities, including graduation, in.
I want to be really clear that I've been on the board for 6 years, and Mark Kelly's been trying to get an outside graduation for 6 years. It has nothing to do with COVID-19. I can tell you that right now. Mark's dying to have a football field graduation.
So you're saying there's an ulterior motive to his?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Hey, Deanne, I agree with him. Darlene, too, probably.
Oh, yeah. Outside's good. Outside's good.
Yeah.
Yep, let's do it.
As long as we can wear shorts, but Dan Holloway has to wear that purple suit.
Woo!
Right.
I can cut this.
Yeah.
I would like to add, I like, as Bill said, I appreciate everybody's input. I know everybody is concerned about how we deal with these issues, and everybody has put in a lot of time on it. I appreciate that. Important dates: Excellence in Education, May 12th. Board meeting, May 20th. Prom, that is again our pinpointed date. We'll see. Graduation, as we just talked about, appointed June 7th. Obviously, those are dates subject to change and likely to change. Entertain a motion.
I got it. Action for a closed session to immediately precede the regular meeting in May, including any record or vote to discuss items and issues allowable under section 610.021 of the Missouri Sunshine Law.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Darlene Bailey,
Yes.
Dan Holloway,
Yes.
Matt Hunt,
For the last time, yes.
John Kern,
John?
John Kern.
John.
Frozen, I think.
His face froze.
He's frozen.
He said yes. I heard.
Dan Weekly,
Yes.
Susan Warman,
Yes.
Mark Kelly.
Yes. Meeting adjourned. Thank you all.